So I'm working at British Gas, and we currently have a weird way that we add tags to analytics for our pages. So each page requires a page name, a page section, and a page type. And depending on the URL or what's happening, you apply this page name. That way we can automatically filter all related areas of the site, so we know where people are going. But the problem is, if we have to add that to each and every route that we have, you'll be going through loads of routes trying to put the data in, and it's just nightmare to maintain because you never know what's tagged and what's not. So the problem, we want a good way of adding data to a lot of existing routes and any new routes. It's currently really hard to keep track of what routes has data and what doesn't. So you end up losing a lot of part of your analytics, so you realize that a journey's not been tagged or whatever. The last one is I'm really lazy, and I hate having to go through each and every route and changing every little bit because it's just annoying. So what I do is, as I believe every good developer should do, is be the right kind of lazy, where you spend hours and hours and hours over-engineering a solution when you just don't want to do the tedious task. So, what are the key points that I want from this? It needed to be clear what has and hasn't been tagged. If you'd like to move. It needs to be really convenient for you to add all your data to the routes. And the data needs to be easily accessible, like something that you see day to day. So when you're adding a route, you don't forget to add it to a random config file that's just in the ether, and you hope that someone updates it, and you know one dev isn't going to update it. So that leads me to try and create a solution. Where should the data be? Currently, we have a system for breadcrumbs in which we have this giant, ugly JavaScript object that if you ever need to get any data, you just reference it from the router. But it takes up like half the file, and it just makes the whole file look messy. But I do think it should be in the router. So I'll show you an example of what we currently have. So this sits just above the router, and we have repeating names. And an issue you have is if someone types the name wrong of the route, then that data is never there. So I looked at potentially adding it to where we define the routes. So this is like a mock-up of meta.set, where inside the function you could set the meta that way. But I thought maybe we could go one step further, because that's just going to add extra lines and it's going to make it look messy still. So that's where I came up with this really terribly named add-on. I'm open to any suggestions. So this .route, you need this .route to define any route. So why don't we add extra data to it? So currently the second parameter is reserved, well, maybe not reserved, but can be used for page data, page ID. But it doesn't seem to use anything else. Anyone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But so I thought, how about we just use this object to add extra data, like page name or section. And that way, when you're defining the route, it's just there. So there's no hassle of anything. And it just auto-compiles, puts it into a service that you can later use. So there's an initializer that runs this. We save the old route from Ember route to DLS. Once we've saved the old route, we override the route by calling it. And then simply, we check the second parameter, if it's an object and not a function. And if it has any extra data, we register it to our service. And then on destroy, we make sure we set it back. That way there's no problems if, for whatever reason, you don't need it, or during tests. So it's got four main methods that is to be used. Get route, which is simple, forgive the Java-like syntax, but you just put the string of the route that you want, paste it in, and it will give you all data related to that route. But for us, we had a bit of a specific thing. So because some routes were in, or pages were in sections, such as my account section, we didn't want to have to write my account for every single route that was related. So the idea of being able to inherit things from its parent route was really good for us. So I created another function called get metadata by route. It takes the string, and then it takes another optional parameter. So it will either take the default attributes that you typically would want, or you can specify which attributes you'd like. So if you only wanted page name instead of page name, page type, and section, you can pick them there. But the benefit of this one is that it actually, if you can't fulfill all the data that you've put in your attributes, it will check its parent route for it, and if they can't find it in the parent, it will keep bubbling up until you specified not to bubble up anymore. Edit route, because sometimes at runtime you might need to edit the route, or if you have dynamic segments. So for example, on our journey, if you are booking an engineer, you can have an ASV or you can have an IB journey. If you have an ASV and an IB or an IB or an ASV, the URLs are different, but we want the same data for each one. Actually, no, sorry, the page name will change from IB appointment, ASV appointment, or a combined appointment. The last one is set attributes. Set attributes is related to get metadata by route. It's so you can just set your defaults of what you would like it. So if you ever run get metadata, rather than specifying it every time, if there's typical ones that you would use in certain routes, you can do that. So this is a little mock-up of how it would work. It's just a route, grandparent, parent, and child, or with section, page type, and page name. When you run the function, this.getRouteMetaService.metadata by route, you specify what the route is that you want to get from and the attributes you want. And this is, at the bottom, it's just an expected result of what you'd get returned back. Here's a little look at the implementation. So I decided to use recursion as the best way of doing this. That way, because it does everything it needs to, so why not just repeat it? And then at the end, it filters out anything unnecessary that you don't need. Is there any questions about that or potential uses? Nope. Okay. Thanks.